Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for tonight's presentation, Who Will Speak for You, a virtual discussion hosted by Bay State Health Senior Class. Our presenter this evening is Dr. Moore Brennan. She, as you can see on your screen, she is the Program Director for Bay State Health Geriatrics Workforce Enhancement Program, the Program Director for Geriatric Medicine Fellowship, and the Division of Geriatrics, Palliative Care, and Post-Acute Medicine for Bay State Health. This evening, all attendees will be muted, but you will be invited to type your questions in the Q&A box. We'd like to thank you all for attending, and we'd like to thank Dr. Moore Brennan for her time with this presentation. Dr. Brennan?
Okay, thank you all for coming, and I hope we'll have an interesting and informative discussion today. I wanted to start off with a little humor about advanced directives that you can look over. The patient is told that an advance directive has been drawn up for him already. Kill me if I have a headache, kill me if I'm itchy, kill me if I complain too much. And he said, I might want to edit this. And his friend says, there you go, complaining again. So this is a little bit of how people sometimes respond when the topic is brought up. This is what you signed up for today, what went out in the flyer that recruited you to join this. And we're going to be talking about some of the barriers to advanced care planning and different terms and forms and how you could get these into your medical record. More specifically, I wanted to review with you some of the classic patterns of the final years of life and think about why it's important for you and for your family and loved ones to do a bit of planning in advance. And we will go through proxies, living wills, and MOLST, medical orders for life-sustaining treatment forms. And I hope, even though this is not as interactive as I would like, if we were face-to-face, you'll have a little bit of a chance to reflect on what's most important to you and your values, and hopefully decide to either begin or advance the conversation with your family and your physicians and other clinicians. And make sure at a minimum that you've got a healthcare proxy documented in the record. So we're going to put up our first poll questions to sort of get a little bit of a pulse of the audience. So go ahead and click in and answer those 3 questions, and let's get the pulse of the audience.
Question 1 is 64% yes, 21% no, and 15% no answer.
All right.
Question 2 is 26% yes, 11% no, 45% maybe, and 19% no answer.
Okay.
Question 3 is 51% yes, 26% no, and 23% no answer.
Okay, so that's really interesting to me. Doesn't surprise me too much, but that's great. It sounds like probably 2/3 of folks have a proxy documented, but when it comes to the differences between the different documents and actually talking to people about their wishes, much lower percentage. Woody Allen didn't want to grow old and doesn't intend to die, but he does appear to be aging if you compare the photographs. And this also is humorous, but gets to the heart of what I think some of the challenges, and maybe even some of what underlies what we saw in the previous poll, that people may fill out a form, but they're not so good thinking about it or talking about it with other folks. But the ostrich approach really doesn't solve the problem. Alternatively, you could approach things the way my mother did. She always said, something's going to get you. Nobody gets out of life alive. And that's about correct. That's her living until she died roughly a month before her death at my daughter's wedding. So that's the goal, right? To make the most you can of the time you have and to live as vibrantly as you can until the end arrives. I think probably everybody on the teaching session is well aware that the American population is aging. This is not an impending disaster. This is a success. I hate that business of like the silver tsunami that's going to roll over us. This is us. This is our parents. These are our old teachers. These are our neighbors. But the bottom line is that there are more older people, and therefore it becomes more pressing to sort of think about these things and plan ahead of time. There are three classic patterns for those final months and sometimes years of life. The top graph shows a pattern that's typical for somebody with a cancer. Obviously varies person to person, but those people often hold pretty well for a long period of time and then decline very rapidly over a short period of time. Then there are a whole bunch of other chronic problems, heart disease, lung disease, things like that, where you get better, you get worse, you get better, you get worse, but it sort of gradually declines over time. And then there's that final pattern that's got some variability to it, but is pretty steady decline. And I think about this in terms of the camellia, where the blossom falls from the tree intact very quickly, closer to the cancer pattern, or this one where the blossom sort of gradually fades on the vine, maybe closer to the dementia pattern. And this one with the cherry blossoms, where how quickly the blossoms fall varies with whether it's raining or windy. It's really the same thing as the graph I showed you, but maybe this makes it a little bit easier to hold in your mind and conceptualize. So get into the second poll now, and let's see what your answers are to these questions. These are the ones we're interested in trying to see sort of what you would prioritize as your highest values. And there is a difference in terms of whether people want to know if they may be approaching the end of life. Many do, some do not. But you can tell. I mean, obviously these are not mutually exclusive, right? You may care about comfort and spiritual growth and time with loved ones, and what you pick from the bottom one might kind of depend a little bit on the details of the clinical prognosis, what was going on with you, and what your potential treatment choices might be. So it's a little bit theoretical, but it will give us perhaps a sense of what, at least right now, at this moment in time, you might think you prioritize.
If I were in my final months of life, I would want to know yes, yes, 81%, no, 6%, can't even think about it, 2%, no answer, 12%. If I were nearing the end of life, the most important thing would be comfort, 33%, spiritual growth, 17%, completing tasks, will, finances, etc., 21%, time with loved ones, 56%, no answer, 10%.
Okay.
If living a little longer would require admission to the hospital, I would stay at home and try to feel the best I could, 46%. I would stay at home and try to, excuse me, it's a very long answer. 23% was the second one.
Okay. Whatever they could to live the longest.
Not sure, might try the treatment admission, see how I felt, was 25%. No answer was 12%. And that's it.
That's actually really interesting to me because this pretty much fits the evidence in the medical literature nationally. It is about 80 or 90% of people who usually say they want to know, but there is that subset that say they don't. And most people approaching the end of life do pick time with loved ones as the highest priority, although the other things are important to them too. And the last answer is also pretty much in line with the literature. People either choose to stay home and focus on comfort or feel their way as they go, but there are a subset again who feel like the most important thing is to hang in there as long as possible, even at the cost of some additional burden from the treatment. Interesting. So there are a lot of reasons why this can be very hard to discuss and to think about. And I think, honestly, whether it's the clinicians or whether it's the patients or whether it's the families, the biggest is the emotion around a potential end of life. And that the expression of that emotion is also colored by the nature of the relationships in the family and the cultural expectations. Many often feel like, oh, it's important, but I'll do it sometime. This is not the time. And there's often that cultural impulse to try to protect each other. I think there's also a challenge about just finding the words. Like, what do you say? How do you open it up? Like, how would you get that discussion started? And the truth is, another piece to the puzzle is what are the realities of the situation that you're in? Because virtually all of us would want to live as long as we could and feel as good as we could, right? We wouldn't want to trade one off against the other. But if people haven't been upfront with you about what's likely to happen or kind of what the realistic outcomes are going to be from whatever treatment it is they're talking about, how are you going to figure it out? And so a piece of that is on us, the medical professionals. The forms can be cut and dried when a lot of times the answer really feels like it should be, it depends, and people change over time. Right? And as we saw in the earlier poll, some people just don't want to go there. They'd rather have you talk to family about it or trust that others will come to the right decision in the future. Doctors have some of the same problems around emotion. We worry about whether people will quote unquote lose hope. Often we're not very well trained in this kind of discussion and communication. There may be a little bit of a hot potato approach where the cardiologist says the primary care doctor should talk about it. The primary care doctor says, well, it's a heart problem. The cardiologist can talk about it. The hospitalist says they should do it when the patient's not in the hospital. The outpatient guy says, why didn't people in the hospital tell the patient what was going on? So there's a little bit of kind of dodgeball here. And there's also still some of that I have to prove to the patients and the families that I'm, quote unquote, fighting to the bitter end. Probably much of that is not surprising to you, but what you may not know is that the literature is pretty clear that doctors and advanced practitioners are not good at predicting the time of death. We're good at knowing where it's going to go, but we're not necessarily so good about calling the time. And that's a real challenge because we also may wind up falling into that, oh, it's not the time to bring this up. So that you wind up raising the issue when somebody is really at the end of a very long road instead of a little bit early. One of the challenges with this, which I think people often don't think about, is that it can be very isolating. If somebody's desperately ill, virtually invariably that person knows he or she is desperately ill. The family knows the person is desperately ill. But if everybody is pretending it's not a problem and nobody's talking about it, or if you come from a culture where talking about it feels like it's going to be emotionally threatening to the person, then nobody can honestly openly discuss emotions or sometimes say what needs to be said. And the truth is, most of us are going to need a surrogate decision maker in the end of life. Probably about 2/3 of patients in their final weeks are ill enough or poorly responsive or confused so that they can't really do it for themselves. And we do know that if you plan ahead, it eases the strain and the suffering on the people who love you, and that you're more likely to have things approached in the way that you would wish. It's important to know that you're it's not like you're committing yourself irrevocably to a single decision or path. You can update or change these decisions anytime as the medical circumstances change or as your social circumstances change. I mean, we've often seen somebody's got a dead person listed as a proxy or a divorced spouse that they would never want involved because they didn't go back and redo it. And it allows you to focus that time that you have in the way that is most important and most valuable for you. So what do? You think, you talk, write it down, and you make sure it's stored in a really safe place. And we'll talk about and what all those things mean. Okay, so we're up to another poll. And let's see, this is a little more nitty-gritty about the sort of details of the specific kinds of documents. So let's see what you think about these questions. And then once we talk about them a bit more, we'll revisit these same questions and see if your answers have changed. They're all legal documents. About half of them said yes, more than half of them. Small number said no, smaller number said unsure. Proxies have to be signed by the proxy. About half of the people thought that was correct, and a smaller number said no. And the last one, oops, no, there's another one. You need the lawyer or a notary public. Small number said yes, and more than half said no. A couple people skipped it. And most people seem not to have known the answer to whether there's kind of a self-expiration date built into the most. Okay, that's interesting. So we're going to go through all this along with some other content, and then we'll see if you feel differently about it. So here's the proxy form. This is not what the form looks like, but this is the content. You print in your name and your address. You print in the name of the person that is going to act as your proxy. If you can no longer speak for yourself, then you put in the address and phone number. And this is a nice feature. You can add a backup. So you can say my wife is first, my son Fred is second, or whatever you choose. That's handy in case somebody else's is ill or away and can't be reached. There's a section where you can write in any limitations on the decision-making abilities of the proxy, although frankly, I'm not certain that would necessarily stand up, particularly if it were challenged. So the key is to pick a person you really trust to approach things the way you would wish. And this next part just sort of describes that this only comes into force if you're unable to make your own decisions. They're supposed to follow what you would want, and if they don't know, kind of use their best judgment about what would be sensible. and then you sign it and you date it. And there's the next section where, let's say you were in the hospital when, your eyes had been injured and you couldn't see the proxy form to even know what you were looking at. Someone else could sign it if they were physically present to watch you be counseled about what it meant and witnessed your decision. And then you have two witnesses who supposedly print their names along with their signatures. Sometimes people don't, and then you can't even read the signature, which is bad, and add their addresses. And that is the sum total of it. It's really pretty straightforward. You fill in the demographic information about the names and the dates and the signatures, and you indicate who you want. It can be updated. It is a legal document. It's straightforward, and it can travel with you across sites. So if you fill one out, it's good in the nursing home, it's good in the community, it's good in your primary care doctor's office, it's good in the hospital. So that's a real plus. And I think what people may not fully appreciate is that the proxy allows flexible decision-making based on the specific circumstances of whatever is going on with you at that moment in time. So it's not you thinking in advance, oh, I want X, I never want Y, but it's somebody who can talk to the doctors about the probability that something will or will not work, what's going to happen if you don't do it. It can cover any eventuality, even if the decision that has come up is nothing that's covered in a different kind of a document. So honestly, to my way of thinking, there is no doubt that this is the most critical, basic, and important of all the advanced care planning documents. Again, we talked about it before. People may die, develop a dementia, move away, relationships change. You may need to update it. And it might not alleviate much stress on the proxy, whoever you pick, because it actually doesn't require the proxy to sign. Like your counsel, that you should talk to the person about what you want, but you're not required to do it. You don't have to prove you did it. And the proxy may not even know that you named them. Wouldn't be smart to do it that way, but that's sort of the way the document is set up. And occasionally, particularly in certain cultures, it can be a bit of a barrier when you say, pick one. And people will say, my family. Pick one. Well, all my children. No, give me one. Some people don't think that way. And it's difficult. And you have to make sure that it's available when and where you need it. So I've got a copy in my safety deposit box. I've got it scanned into the medical record at Bay State and checked to make sure it's there. It's in my doctor's office. My family has a copy. The more the merrier with the copies of the document, because if you get admitted someplace else or something else goes on, you don't have access to it, it won't help you. So on to the most medical orders for life-sustaining treatment. Some states have versions that they call a POLST, physician orders for life-sustaining treatment. They're very similar. Some is the same. Put down your demographics, your date of birth. If there's a medical record number, you add that. This one needs to be signed by a doctor or an advanced practice person, a PA or an MP, in addition to the person that the decision making is about. If you do not have a proxy or a guardian, nobody else is supposed to be signing for you. So that's another reason to have a healthcare proxy, right? If you don't have a proxy in place, technically your spouse or child can't sign a MOLST, although I've certainly seen people do it. I don't think it would be legally valid if it were challenged. So that's important also. And the choices that you're asked to make are whether you would want an attempt at CPR, resuscitation, whether you would want a ventilator, a breathing machine, if you were unable to kind of get enough oxygen and air in there on your own, and if you would want what's called non-invasive ventilation. That's kind of a funny high-pressure mask that pushes the oxygen. On the flip side of the form, there are kind of optional additional questions, which most people, but not all people, fill out as well. Asks whether you would want to come back to the hospital again if you got really sick, and whether you want to have dialysis or IV fluids. This is, well, I should say artificial nutrition, not hydration twice. But you get the idea. So that's sort of the bottom line here. The benefits are it does not expire, right? So that's the answer to that question. But the challenge is you may need to update it because your clinical circumstances and your kind of realities and your wishes may change. It is a legal document. So that part is good. And it also, like the proxy, is valid across sites. So in the old days, before we had these, I'd be having discussions with patients in the hospital. The patient would get discharged to the nursing home, and they wouldn't have readdressed it yet because he just got there that day. He would automatically revert to do everything because they hadn't talked to him about it. And then the poor guy would wind up bouncing back to the hospital again, even though he had just told me he didn't want to. So we can avoid that now with this MULST form. You do not need a lawyer. None of these things we're talking about for today necessarily need to require any kind of legal fees. And it does put the patient's kind of voice into some of the treatment decisions. And they're working on, and my partner Jody may know a little bit more about this, kind of a centralized statewide repository for electronic versions of this. We're not there yet. That would be a big improvement. Then no matter what hospital you went to, the data would be there. It's not really nuanced in terms of potential scenarios, and it can't be, by just the nature of sort of this kind of templated form. But what you pick might be really different depending on the circumstances that you're in and what your realistic options are. Again, like the proxy, you have to make sure that there are copies available if you need it. And the piece that I think people frequently don't fully appreciate is that even though this is a legal document, the truth is, if you've got a designated proxy standing there saying something different, and you can't speak for yourself, very probable that the treating team is going to listen to the person that you designated as the proxy, which in a way is not necessarily a bad thing as long as you pick the right person, because again, that person can hear the nuances of the probabilities of what's going on with you right now. But don't think that just because you have a MULST filled out that you don't have to worry about sort of choosing the right proxy or talking to the proxy about how you really want to approach things. Even though I think virtually all states have some version of this, there's some debate about whether the forms are valid across state lines, and there's kind of a national movement to deal with that as well. Okay, I'm going to shift gears now and talk about broader advanced care plan documents that are usually called living wills. There are many different versions of these. I picked 3 to tell you about today that I particularly like and that I think may be useful resources for you. The first is one that's called Prepare for Your Care. Very simple language. So if you have a family member that only has a 6th grade education, they'll be able to read through this thing and it will make sense. That's a beautiful thing to have it straightforward. There's a button you can hit that shifts the whole website into Spanish. If there are people with Spanish speakers in family or themselves on the line. And a lot of videos and tools that can help you think things through. And they even have kind of drop down menus based on the state that you live in. The goal is to fill it out at home and then bring it in at your next doctor's visit to kind of prompt the discussion and get the doc or the advanced practice person to fill out what other legal documents, proxy, et cetera, you might need and get it scanned into your record. And there is data that it's effective. I actually didn't think it was going to work, but it did. Right? I was not at all convinced that giving stuff to patients and telling them to bring it into their doctors would really move the bar, but it did increase the administrative time. This next one is also superb. It's probably the best known one right now and most widely used. We use it all the time in our home care program. It's the Conversation Project under sponsorship of the Institute for Healthcare. Initially, Healthcare Improvement initially had support from the Hartford Foundation as well. They have materials available in the 3 languages that you see there, and there is a wealth of written materials, toolkits, and videos. One of the pieces that I particularly appreciate with this one is that they have special guides that they put together for children who are ill, or patients with dementia, even material around sort of thinking through what you might want to do around potential exposure to COVID-19. So it's very specialized. Another that's been around a long time that has its strengths is the 5 Wishes. Very long track record. It's not as exclusively medical as some of the others, and it includes an opportunity for you to write down things like how you would want your funeral approached, or how you want people to remember you. I actually worked through this one with my mother-in-law when she was in kind of early to moderate stages of dementia, and she could still tell me how she felt about things, and I kept it and we scanned it into the record. And it was a guide and a support as we moved forward over the next years. So as with all of them, challenge with the living wills, or you may need to update them. Here's a key for your earlier question. These are not legal documents in Massachusetts. They are in some states. It varies by state. And again, like your mulls, it may very well be trumped in terms of what you put down by what your proxy says at the time. So that's that kind of foundational importance of the healthcare proxy. It does not expire. You don't need a lawyer. Gives a much more nuance in terms of sort of patients' wishes and values. And you can use them kind of over the kitchen table to prompt discussion with your family members and loved ones. And you can bring them in and prompt discussion with the doctors and advanced practice folks who are looking after you, as in fact I did in the case of my mother-in-law. So we're going to revisit those same poll questions once more and see if your answers are different and I clarified anything for you. Ordinarily, when I would work with community people on this topic, I would do it with, breakouts and people discussing in tables. So this is a challenge. Healthcare proxy forms, all legal documents. So most people know the answer is no, which is correct, because the living wills are not legal in Massachusetts. The forms must be signed by the proxy. Most people now know that that's not correct. Wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing, but it's not required. And you need the lawyer. People pretty much all know that the answer to that is no. Although some folks skipped it. And people now know, which they didn't before, that the most does not expire. So, okay, that's good. Looks like the correct answer is significantly increased. So that's always encouraging. So I just wanted to close out with a poem, which I have always found to be inspirational. Stanley Kunitz was one of the American poet laureates, and he wrote this poem called The Layers in 1978. He was in his early to mid 70s at that point, and reflecting back over his life and the losses that he had had. But in fact, you'll see that as you reach the end of the poem, it's really very positive and shows a lot of sort of strength and the ability to look forward. And in fact, Stanley Kunitz was right. He lived to be almost 101, and he celebrated his 100th birthday by co-authoring a volume with a younger poet. So he lived probably a quarter of a century or so after he wrote this poem. He said, "I've walked through many lives, some of them my own, and I am not who I was, though some principal being abides from which I struggle not to stray. When I look behind, as I am compelled to look, before I can gather strength and proceed on my journey, I see the milestones dwindling toward the horizon and the slow fires trailing from the abandoned campsites, over which scavenger angels wheel on heavy wings. Oh, I've made myself a tribe out of my true affections, and my tribe is scattered. How shall the heart be reconciled to its feast of losses? In a rising wind, the manic dust of my friends, those who fell along the way, bitterly stings my face. Yet I turn, exulting somewhat with my will to go wherever I need to go, and every stone on the road is precious to me. In my darkest night, when the moon was covered and I roamed through wreckage, a nimbus clouded voice directed me, live in the layers, not on the litter. Though I lack the art to decipher it, no doubt the next chapter in my book, Transformations, is already written. I am not done with my changes." Now we have one final poll, and then we'll shift to the questions and answers. Basically, I'm trying to figure out if you're going to do anything differently in the next weeks based on this discussion. And that last abbreviation, ACP, that stands for Advanced Care Plan. Probably should have spelled that out. I should have put in a poll question about the poet. No, we don't have time. Okay, we got about 15 minutes left. Discussion.
We're just about done, just a couple people finishing up.
Okay. And the proxy, or I'm going to do it. Like 90%ish. That's pretty darn good. I understand the differences, and kind of 90%ish people think they do understand. And in some ways, 3 is the most important. The discussion. People say they're going to speak to family and loved ones or continue and advance that. And about 50% say they're going to do something differently as a result of the teaching session. So that's a win from my perspective. Thank you. That's great. Now ready for your discussion. So I'm going to stop sharing and come back to the main screen.
There's already some. Thank you for that presentation, Dr. Brennan. That was great. And I personally love the poem. We already have some questions in the Q&A box that I thought that you could talk about. I don't know if you can see them or if Jody can see them. If you want, Jody is joining you for the Q&A.
Yeah, my buddy Jody Kashu is good enough to step in and agree to help answer anything that I got stumped on. Jody's long-timer at Bay State in our quality division, and probably, I would guess, the single person who's devoted the most concerted effort to kind of moving the bar in terms of advanced care planning documentation within the Bay State system. So I am delighted.
So I can see the questions, Dr. Brennan. I'm happy to share them with you.
Okay.
And of course, I'd be happy to help. So let's see, what do you do when your children don't want to talk about what you want done?
Well, what would you say, Jody?
I always go back to the importance of honoring our loved ones' wishes. And, you know, I always go back to my own personal experiences because that's what helps me. But in talking to my patients who say, you know, my children don't want to engage in this type of conversation, I would just say to them, you know, explain that knowing what my wishes are going to make things easier for you and your siblings or your loved ones, my grandchildren later in life. And, you know, I know you love me, and this is a way that you can honor what I want done. So really, it's just having a heart-to-heart conversation with the people who care for you.
Yeah, I agree. And the other piece that I would add is this is very rarely what a doctor would call kind of a one and done, right? This is a series of conversations and an understanding that grows over time. And something else that might help is if you go to the Conversation Project and download some of their materials and look at it, because that's exactly what it's geared towards, kind of guiding a conversation with family and loved ones, and do it in kind of bits and pieces. But if you tell them that it will make life easier for them in the future, which it will, and it will set your mind at rest now, which it almost certainly will, you can usually get past it if you go gently in stages. I hope that helps.
And the other thing that I can think of is not everybody chooses their children to be their healthcare proxy.
Yeah.
So whether you want to choose a spouse or a best friend or a neighbor or whomever you trust that would make the decisions that you want. And again, I can share from personal experiences. I wanted something different than my mom wanted. And I had to put myself in her shoes and make the decisions that she wanted, because my role was not to be her daughter at that moment. My role was to be her proxy and make sure what she wanted to be done was done. So you have to make sure that you choose that person who's going to honor what your wishes are. The next question is it true that depending on functional capacity of that day, a healthcare proxy's invocation can wax and wane?
The answer is yes, but it's not so much a matter of function, because you could be really weak and unable to move around and still able to speak and say what you want. But I know what I think you mean, because very frequently when people are sick or in the final weeks and months of life, they're not clear enough in their minds to do this kind of sophisticated decision making, even if they're able to sort of express a bit about how they feel and what they would want. And that situation, there's kind of a fancy term for it. The medical term is a delirium, but by its nature, a delirium can kind of fluctuate. over the course of hours, days, and weeks, so that there might be moments that the person is put together enough to do at least some complex decision making, but that could rapidly change. So yes, it can vary day by day, and it also depends on what you're talking about, right? Because very frequently, I'll go see somebody in the hospital who's maybe got a significant dementia, and I wouldn't try to do a MULS and discuss probabilities around what benefit they are or aren't going to get from a breathing machine. But that patient may very well be able to say, I trust Jody, she's my daughter, she's a good person, she can talk to the doctors. So it also depends partly on the person's abilities at that moment, but also partly on the complexity of what they're being asked. And designating a surrogate is not as challenging kind of in terms of cognition as some of this other stuff that we're talking about.
Another similar question as a previous was, what if family members are dismissive about talking about these things? And I personally would say, do what Dr. Brennan said and go to the documents and fill them out so that your wishes are written down, even though it might not be legally binding. When your children are ready, or again, maybe you won't choose your children as your proxy, but you'll have that discussion already written down for them to look back on and reflect of what you want. So whether that's the conversation project guides that will guide you through what your wishes are, or the 5 wishes, or some of the other documents that she mentioned. It's also very insightful for yourself when you go through those documents. It brings up things that you may not have thought of.
Yep.
Okay, sorry, I'm reading the same question. Does a healthcare proxy need to be signed by both the patient and, it says question mark. Oh wait, sorry, these are what questions.
Yep. So who needs to sign a healthcare proxy? That's an easy one. It's straightforward. The person who's making the decision about designating the surrogate, you, signs it. A doctor doesn't have to sign it, right? And a lawyer doesn't have to sign it, but 2 witnesses have to sign it, and the witnesses are not supposed to be the healthcare proxy, believe it or not. I think the legal concern is that there could be some conflict of interest, and somebody says they saw you sign it because they want to make a decision that you don't like. Who the heck knows what was in the lawyer's mind when it was drawn up? But it should be 2 people, not the proxy, who sign as witnesses. It can be the doctor or the nurse in the hospital or the front desk receptionist, but it doesn't have to be. It can be your next door neighbor, if you're doing it in the community, anybody. Those are the only signatures that are required.
Will you be sharing the slides? Your approach was great and the outline was so easy to understand.
Well, I'm delighted. And soon for the details, but yes, apparently the whole thing is being taped and is going to be up on the Bay State web somewhere. Where will it be posted, Sue?
BayStateHealth.org/myplan.
Okay.
It'll also be on the Bay State Health Senior Class website. You could just put in search on the website and you'll.
And Dr. Brennan, can you hear me?
Yep, I'm here.
That question came from Deborah Provost. So I know you know her email. You could probably shoot her the slides also.
Deb can have it.
So there's something here that says probably write a living will with an attorney and talk to husband or other family members. I think that was a question. I'm not sure how the question came through.
You need a lot of living will. Certainly, if you go to a lot of the good elder care attorneys and you're doing a whole combination of things, estate planning, whatever, they often will have at least a healthcare proxy and sometimes some version of a living will as kind of the package that they will work through with you. And that's okay. But you don't need a lawyer to do any of these. You have to sign them all, and depending on the document, either the doc or witnesses need to sign it.
Barbara's asking or saying, I would have made a different decision about hospitalization if it had been during COVID and my family or caregiver could not have been able to visit.
Yep, and that's a good point and gets back to a little bit of what I said earlier, where people can get, in a way, a false sense of security from filling out the documents, not so much the proxy, but the others, because what's going to happen to you may not be what comes up in those documents, and the specific circumstances of what's going on at that moment is going to influence how you feel about what you would pick. So that's absolutely a perfect example of that, and that's why it's so critical, if you can possibly pull it off, to sort of have a proxy to really understand your values and how you would want to approach things. And again, just a reminder, none of this stuff is like, tablets coming down from the mount. You can redo them anytime. So what you would want when you're kind of well and may have many years of life, may be very different, would be for me, or what you would want if you were very frail and probably in your last months of life. So you should kind of revisit and redo these as appropriate periodically as well.
Nicole said, after my father's excruciating death to cancer, my mom is very adamant about wanting assisted suicide if she gets to that point. Is there a way to facilitate in that in Massachusetts at this point? Or would we have to, or could we go to another state for this?
The physician-assisted suicide measures have not passed in this state. It is legal in some other states. The honest truth, though, is that it is a minuscule number of people who actually really want it. And I'll explain what I mean. That nobody wants to die a lingering, suffering, demeaning death, with the rarest of extraordinary situations. And it sounds like maybe that's what happened in this case, because it was described as agonizing. What people usually really want and deserve is high-level access to superb end-of-life care so that they don't die an agonizing death. And then you don't have to give away the time that you have that might still be of some value to you for fear of the suffering that's going to come. So there are a small subset of people who do want assisted suicide, but it's very, very small numbers when you look nationally. And if you can meet those people's needs in terms of alleviating the suffering, they generally do not persist in asking for an assisted death. So I personally think it might very well make sense, although you can make ethical arguments on either side, but the crying need is not for assisted suicide. The crying need is for high quality interprofessional end-of-life palliative and geriatrics care. We could do that, and that's what people deserve. Most of it would go away.
So I'm just going to answer one question. Somebody asked for clarification about who really does need to sign a healthcare proxy. So it is the patient and 2 witnesses
Correct.
to the signature. The witnesses are only to the signature.
Correct.
And then the last question, I'm going to combine 2 of them. One is asking, all of my doctors should have a copy of my healthcare proxy and most ? And then, should we carry copies of these documents on our person in case we have an accident and all of our contacts are unreachable?
What do you think?
I don't think it hurts to carry them on your person. I would just say try to have your documents at your hospital of choice. Your provider, your doctor might not always be attached to your hospital. If he is and they share the same electronic medical record, then just having it on file in that electronic medical record is fine. I don't think it hurts to give a bunch of people copies as long as you keep it up to date. And because if you change it, then you have to make sure that everybody has the most recent copy.
That's what I would say too. And if you wanted to, there's no harm in carrying it around, but I don't know that you have to. On the other hand, if you've got an index card in your wallet, kind of like, I'm an organ donor thing, and it says, in case of emergency, my healthcare proxy is, Joe Schmo at such and such a number, and I have advanced care planning documents on file in Bay State or wherever you've got them, then that probably would be good enough, because if you're anything like me, they're probably going to get pretty beat up in your handbag after a while.
This is a great question. If you have a healthcare proxy and you have a MOLST, do you need a living will?
I think the answer to that is it depends, right? Because there are, they serve different purposes. The living will is really more to stimulate thought and discussion than to meet a legal need. So if you've had nuanced discussions with your proxy and there's a MOLST that's filled out, you may not need to fill it out. But I think almost starting the other way around before you even go to a MOLST and thinking through some of those templates and questions and documents may get you to a more kind of elaborated understanding of your own feeling and goals. So like most things in medicine, it depends, right? But there's a different value to each, I think.
I think so too. And my thought of it is my MOLST is my voice. That's my order that I've talked to with my doctor for life-sustaining treatment. My healthcare proxy is only going to get invoked if you can't communicate with me. So my living will is my guide for my proxy. Everything that I write down and all the things that I want, I'm going to give it to my proxy so that it will help them make the decisions for me. And our last question here is, Barb is asking, aren't you talking about hospice or palliative care?
I'm certainly talking about palliative care. If you're thinking about, and it's actually a really good question, because even a whole lot of doctors and nurses are not clear on the difference between palliative care and hospice. Palliative care is a specialized approach with additional training for interprofessional teams to ease suffering. So maybe, I'm just making up an example. Maybe you're a cancer patient who's getting chemotherapy and you're struggling with all kinds of nasty side effects from the chemotherapy. If you have access to a palliative care team, they may be able to help you feel a lot better with those symptoms and work on supporting your family through social work and help you think through advanced care planning documents and all the rest of it. But you may be going to get completely better from that cancer, right? That doesn't mean that you're necessarily in your last months of life. Maybe things go badly and you are. Maybe you get a cure. So hospice is for people who we expect to be in their last 6 months of life if things follow kind of the expected course. So hospice is kind of a subtype of palliative care. A palliative care, alleviating suffering and supporting people through difficult times, is much broader. So they're not exactly the same. And if we reflect back a moment to one of the things that I said earlier on, doctors are not so good at calling the timing, right? Well, the patients and the families are not so good at calling the timing either. And if you add the patients and the families don't want to think about it, talk about it. The other lady said her children won't even discuss it with her, right? And you add that to the doctors know what's going to happen, but they don't know when. And we tend to be overly optimistic about how people are going to do. That kind of gets you in a point where people may not start thinking about what's important or whether it's time to shift course until very, very late. And that links to the hospice discussion, because even though as a Medicare beneficiary, probably a lot of you are, right? I've got part of Medicare, you're entitled to 6 months of interprofessional hospice care if that's what's going to best serve your needs. You know how long most people are on hospice? I think the median is something like 12 days. Not the best, right? So again, kind of thinking earlier and prodding not just your family, but your treating team to think about it sooner is almost always in your best interest.
So I'm going to wrap it up and let you know, Dr. Brennan, that there are many, many comments thanking you for the presentation, the information, and your informative approach.
There are few topics closer to my heart or more important. And we're all going to do it, right? So it's kind of like taxes, right? Unavoidable.
I'm going to turn it back
Thank
over
you
to you, Sue.
I just want to say thank you to you both for the great Q&A, and thank you, Dr. Brennan, for that great presentation and for all your work helping out individuals with this topic. Have a great evening.
Very good. Thanks
Thank
to
you.
the audience and for sticking with me to the bitter end. So on.
Thanks, Dr. Brennan. Take care.
Thank you, Jody.